Hi, my name is David Rippy. I am a certified hypnotherapist where I take clients into a deep hypnotic state where they can share details of a previous life. This is the chapter titled First Mate O'Brien of the Royal Navy in the book The Immortal Soul. Enjoy.
First Mate O'Brien of the Royal Navy. This session was with a female subject in her late 20s. She went deeply into a hypnotic state and shared a fairly remarkable life. David, we're going to say a prayer of protection first. We want this to be a reading that is accurate to where she finds some information that will help her in this life and maybe discover things she's brought into this life from other past lives. So, we'd like to ask for protection, surrounding ourselves with our guardian angels and archangels. Putting a circle of protection and light around us to where no darkness may enter, only the Christ consciousness and those with love for our highest intent, and to protect us during this reading for Dash. I would like to count down from 5 to 1. Hypnosis entry. Before any subjects are ever regressed, a prayer of protection is used. The purpose of regression is to help the various subjects in many different ways, gaining a stronger perspective of the immortality of the soul, healing past or current traumas, and learning more about themselves. David, feel your body encased in gold and divine light, seeing yourself resting inside this beautiful bubble of light with your eyes closed. See a beautiful golden protective layer of bubble energy as it now has encapsulated your body. You feel so safe, so secure as we count down. Feel relaxed as you're floating inside. Feel yourself just floating along in this beautiful bubble. And you're floating along, just drifting along, floating over a beautiful field, so light and so relaxed. As we count from 5 to 1, and you're feeling so good, just sinking further into the bubble as it's carrying you along very lightly and very nicely on your journey. Just floating along in this beautiful golden lit bubble of divine light, protecting you and just carrying you along on a very mild breeze. Counting down from 5 to 4. Feeling yourself just floating, floating, floating. Hearing my voice, we count from 4 down to 3. Just floating along. So safe and secure as we have our angels around us watching you float along. As we count from 3 down to 2. And as you're floating, all you hear is my voice. Not falling asleep, so relaxed, so relaxed. As we look to the past at other times, other places, to where you might have lived in another time, a past life. As you're floating along in your bubble, floating along, we're looking for a life or lives that have some impact or meaning on this current life. Your eyes are closed, and your mind's eye is opening up to lives that will benefit you in this life. These are lives that you had in the past, that can help you for your highest good, and that aid your progress going forward in this life. Your bubble floats along, you're just floating along. And you begin to picture some type of a dwelling. And in your mind's eye, you're so relaxed, and when you see something in your mind, I want you to describe it to me. Silence. David, do you see anything? Subject, I see a house, a cottage. David, describe the cottage. What color is it? Subject, it's stone with a thatched roof and a chimney on the left side. David, are there windows? Subject, there are 2 windows. David, is it a 1-story or a 2-story stone house? Subject, it's 2 stories. David, is there a sidewalk leading up to it or grass? Subject, it's just a dirt path. David, and is this where you lived at one time? Subject, when I was very small. David, so when you look at this house and we're just observers, can we walk up to the front door of the house and open the door? Subject, you could, but the door is open. David, can you walk inside for me and tell me what you see? Subject, I see a kitchen on the left, a stove. I see pots. I see cobwebs and dust. David, does it look like it hasn't been cleaned in a while? Why would there be cobwebs? Subject, my mother doesn't clean very often. David, now look at the stove. Can you describe that to me? Subject, it's made out of a potbelly, an iron potbelly stove. David, is it being used, or is it just sitting there now? Subject, it's being used. David, do you see yourself in the house? How old are you roughly? Subject, I'm 4. David, what are you wearing? A dress? Or pants? Subject, I'm wearing little overall trousers and nothing else. David, do you know your name? Subject, Jacob. David, your name is Jacob. And what color is your hair? Subject, it's a light brown. It's tangled. David, it's tangled up. Do you have shoes on? Subject, no. David, so you're running around. That sounds like fun. Now, can you see your mother in the kitchen as well or in the house somewhere? Subject, I see both my parents. David, what do they look like? Subject, angry. David, laughs, they look angry, okay. And do you know what they're angry about? Subject, they're yelling at each other. David, so they're yelling at each other. Do you know what they're yelling about? Subject, no. No, I don't know. But my dad picked up the kettle off the stove. He hit my mom with it in the head, and she fell on the floor and stopped moving. David, now we're just observing this, okay? I know it's upsetting, but we're just observing. Now what do you do when you see this? Are you shocked or surprised? Subject, I run outside. I run away. David, so you ran away. Now we're just observing, we're just observing. Do you see where you ran to? Subject, I run into the woods, and I hide in a tree until a search party comes and finds me a day later. David, and did you stay in the tree all night? Subject, yes. David, were you nervous or scared? Subject, yes. David, what time of year was this? Subject, late summer. David, so was the temperature still pretty good at night? Subject, it was cold, but it was hot the next day. David, did you have anything to eat that whole time? Were you getting pretty hungry? Subject, I didn't eat anything. I didn't have anything to eat. David, we're just observing. And who came in the search party? Who eventually found you? Subject, my aunt, my mom's sister, and a constable. David, so they came and found you. Subject, yeah. David, and what happened then, once they found you? Subject, I went with my aunt, and I had to sit in a room with another man and my dad, and they told me that I was going to live with my aunt. I wasn't going to see my dad anymore. David, and that was pretty upsetting, I presume? Subject, I was afraid of my dad. David, so you went and lived with your aunt. And was she nice to you? Subject, she was nice. David, that's good. Now does she live close by the stone house? Subject, no, she lived over an hour away, 2 hours. David, 2 hours away. Pretty far away, huh? Subject, yeah. David, and how did you get to your aunt's house? Subject, I rode in a cart with her. David, so you rode in a cart with her, it was pulled by. Subject, it was horses like a coach. David, did it look kind of like a stagecoach? What did it look like? A cart? Describe it to me. Subject, it was open, and there was a spot for luggage or heavy things, and we sat there. And there was a driver that took us, and he led the horses. David, and how many horses were pulling the cart? Subject, 2. David, did they ever tell you what happened to the stone house? Subject, I never went back there. David, was your mother unfortunately killed in that argument? Subject, I never saw her again. I think my dad killed her and went to jail. David, now we're just observing. So, your aunt raised you? Subject, yes. David, and what was your aunt's name? Subject, her name was Annie. David, Annie, that's a nice name. Was she married? Subject, she was married. David, okay, now did you meet her husband too? Subject, yeah, my uncle. Uncle had an important job. David, do you know what his name was? Subject, his name was, pause, William. David, so it was Aunt Annie and Uncle William? Subject, yeah. David, and your name was Jacob? Subject, yes. David, and what was your last name? Do you remember? Subject, it was O'Brien. but my aunt's last name was something else. Her last name was Randolph. David, okay, so William Randolph and Annie Randolph, is that correct? Subject, yeah. David, where was the town that they lived? What was the town's name? Subject, I don't know the name. David, but it was about an hour or two by horse ride or cart to their house, is that correct? Subject, yeah. David, were you too young to know the name of your town, or where your house was before? Subject, I think I came from Sheffield. David, Sheffield. And where was this Sheffield located? Subject, in the country. David, and what country is that? Subject, in England. David, Sheffield, England. Now in your mind, while you're thinking about this, you have to drive about an hour or 2 hours away to get to your aunt's house. Can you see your aunt's house in your mind? Your aunt and uncle's house? Subject, they had more than one house. David, they had more than one house. You said your uncle was pretty important or had a good job, right? Subject, yeah. David, so what did he do for a living? Subject, he worked for the Royal Navy. David, he worked for the Royal Navy? And what did he do with them? Did you ever know? Subject, he was a captain, but he retired because of an injury. He had a pension. So he lived very comfortable. David, you said he captained. Did he captain ships, or did he captain? Subject, he was on ships. Very big ships. David, did he ever share the name of one of those ships with you? Any of the boats he was on? Do you remember any names? Maybe around the house? A model of one or something? Take your time. Subject, he had a boat. It was one of his big boats. But he had a boat, a sailboat. And its name was the Dragonfly. David, so, he named his sailboat the Dragonfly. That's a nice name. And that was his sailboat? Subject, yeah, he taught me to sail. David, oh, that's neat. Was it fun? Subject, yeah, I liked the water. David, when you look at the water, was it near a lake, or was it on the ocean? Subject, it was the ocean. David, so you would go sailing on the ocean with your uncle? Subject, yes. David, and how old were you at that time? Do you remember? When did you first start sailing? Subject, when I was 8. David, you became pretty good? Subject, not until I was 11 or 12. David, and do you remember how long this sailboat was roughly? What would you guess? Subject, it was over 30 feet long. David, when you look at the water and the sailboat, where was the sailboat kept? Subject, we had a dock at the house. Not the cottage, the cove. There was a house. David, what was this house? Subject, that was their beachfront house. Their house was on the beach. David, now do you remember where their beachfront house was located? Subject, in something cove. Cove Road. David, so was that the name of the road they lived on, or was that the name of the cove? Subject, Cove Road. David, now if you were near Sheffield, where you were originally as a young child, and now you're about 11 or so years old, let's go forward a few more years. Do you see yourself at 16 or 18? Subject, I see myself at 18. David, and were you still sailing then? What were you doing at that age? Subject, I worked for the Royal Navy. I worked on the ships. David, wow. So, you got a job with the Royal Navy too? And what was your last name again? Subject, O'Brien. David, now when you were 18, what year did you get that job? Subject, it was 1867. David, so you're pretty sure it was 1867, is that correct? Subject, yes, it was 1867. David, now when you look back at 1867, that was when you were 18, right? Subject, yeah. David, so were you born in 1851 maybe, or do you not know? What year were you born? Subject, I was born in 1850. David, and do you see the month of your birth? What was your birthday? Do you see the month and the day? Subject, March 28, 1850. David, so March 28, 1850, is that correct? Subject, March 28th. David, and do you have a middle name? Do you remember? Subject, it was my father's name. David, so your middle name was your father's name, is that correct? Subject, yeah. David, and what was your father's name? I don't remember asking you that. Subject, his name was Samuel. David, Samuel. So, what was your full name again? Subject, Jacob Samuel O'Brien. David, so, you worked for the Royal Navy. What were some of the names of the ships you worked on? Do you remember? Subject, they all had names of women. They were named after women. David, out of all the ships named after women that you worked on, what was your favorite one? Subject, it was a big ship. It was expensive to crew because it was large, because the masts were tall. David, so how many masts did that ship have? Do you remember? Subject, almost 24. David, 24 masts. Subject, sails. David, 24 sails, okay. So when we look at the masts, how many big masts were on that ship? Do you remember? Subject, there were 4. David, there were 4 masts, okay. And where did that ship sail? Subject, the Indian Ocean. David, so you went to the Indian Ocean. Did it go to any other countries? Subject, we were in tropical islands. David, so you were on the Indian Ocean and you were sailing to tropical islands. Can you give me the name of some of those islands? Subject, they didn't have names. David, they didn't have names at the time? They were just unnamed, unexplored islands? Do you remember? Subject, they were remote, and they did not have very many people living on them. David, so you would sail. Would you sail from England and then go to the Indian Ocean? How long were you gone? Subject, 2, sometimes 3 years. David, 2 to 3 years? Does that sound about right? Subject, I went on long expeditions because of the nature of my position with the Navy. I was responsible for repairs, and I also managed the log. I had to keep journals. David, so you kept records of your journeys, is that correct? Subject, I kept records. David, was this one of the ships that you were on the most or for the longest period? Subject, yeah. David, and how many crew members would go out and sail with you on these long voyages? Subject, about. With crew hands and the captain, it would have been about 30 men. David, 30 men, okay. And what was your position called? Did you have a title or a position? What was your position? Subject, I didn't have a title. I was sort of given the job because of my uncle's influence. David, what was your captain's name that was on that ship the most? What was his name? Subject, his name was. Pause. David, what did it start with? Subject, his name was James Chesterfield. David, that was his name? Was he a good captain? Subject, he was. He was a stingy captain, but he was intelligent. He knew his way around the ocean. David, how was he stingy? Did he stop paying well? Was the food bad? How was he stingy? Subject, he would always try to cut corners on payments. If he said he was paying you a certain amount, it was almost guaranteed that it would be maybe half that when you got home. David, well, that is stingy. Give me an idea. Were you paid by the voyage or the week? How did they pay you? Subject, it would depend on the ship and the captain, and it would depend on the voyage. David, let's say you're on the ship and you're going to these remote islands for 2 or 3 years. When you came back from one of those voyages, what kind of money did you make? Subject, the money could be good if we accomplished what we were meant to accomplish, which might have meant taking natural resources from the islands that we found on the islands. Other times we went ashore to bring back certain plants, bringing back certain types of stone or a certain spice. Some voyages were more cut and dry, and some we made more money than we anticipated. David, and then you would go back to England, I presume, with some of these new treasures or new resources? Subject, we had people who commissioned us to take them to certain islands so that they could study plants and tropical species. David, do you remember who the queen was at this time? Was there a king or queen? Who was running England? Subject, Victoria. David, okay, so there was a Queen Victoria. Was she married? Did she have a husband or not? Subject, she did not. He had died. David, let's go forward some years. Do you see yourself in your 20s or 30s? Subject, yes. David, and what are you doing? Subject, I was part of a voyage to the southern points of land in the Atlantic Ocean. We were looking for gold. David, now when you say southern points, where would that be? Is there a name? Subject, we wound up somewhere in Argentina. David, and did you find gold? Subject, we did, but the people that lived in this place when we came to it were not familiar to our customs. We were not familiar to theirs. And the expedition did not go well. David, so how old were you then? Roughly? Subject, 33. David, 33 years old. And you see yourself now. How much bigger are you now? What do you look like now? Subject, I'm tall. I have very broad shoulders. I have shoulder-length hair that I keep tied back. I have a beard. My hair is a sort of dark blonde, light brown color. I look like my father. David, and how tall do you think you were? Subject, I'm about 6 foot. David, well, it sounds like you're a pretty good sailor at this time, right? Subject, I was very skilled. David, and did you have a different job at this time? Subject, I was promoted. I was serving as first mate. David, first mate. That's a nice job. And who was the captain on this expedition? Do you remember his name? Subject, Fredericks. Captain Fredericks. I don't remember his first name. David, let's go forward some years. What year is it now, roughly? Subject, 1888. David, so you think it was 1888? How old were you? Subject, I'm 38. I'm 38. David, what year were you born again? Do you remember? Subject, 1850. March 28, 1850. David, March 28, 1850. Okay. Subject, I was 38 years old when I died. David, what year was that? Subject, it was in 1888. May the 12th. David, you died on May the 12th. And what did you, we're just observing. You're 38 years old, and it was May 12th, 1888, and do you remember what you died from? Subject, there was a member of our crew who had been stealing, and when I discovered his thievery, we fought. He stabbed me and pushed me overboard. David, now we're just observing. What was his name? Do you remember? I want you to just observe. I just want you to step back and observe. You're not getting involved emotionally. Can you do that for me? Subject, yes. David, all we're doing is observing, and we'll just look at all the facts, but we're not getting involved emotionally, right? Subject, okay. David, don't get involved emotionally, we're just looking at that life. That life is not here anymore. Do you remember the individual's name? Subject, his name was John Waters. David, and where were you pushed overboard? Do you remember if you were at sea or where were you? Subject, we had made port, but we were on the boat. David, now I want you to just observe. Now where did he stab you? Do you remember? Subject, Sharp and Hale, he stabbed me in the lower abdomen. David, now we're just going to observe, is that okay? Subject, yes. David, here's how we're going to get through this. I am here with you, and you're in a golden bubble of light protection, okay? So we're just looking at this. We're not getting involved emotionally. Can you do that? Subject, yes. David, so you were pushed overboard. Then what happened? Subject, David, don't tell me emotional things, just facts. Just think and observe. Subject, I fell overboard, and I couldn't swim because of where I had been stabbed. I drowned. David, now just observe. We're just observing together, the two of us, no one else. And we're just looking at that life, and you're not getting emotionally involved. We're just looking at the life. And after you drowned, and what happened? Subject, it felt like a dream. My body was stuck under the water, and I thought that I saw my mother. She pulled me loose and took me out of the water with her. David, and you came up through the water? Subject, yes. Not my physical body, though. That stayed. David, so you felt like it was a dream. And you saw your mother that passed when you were only 4 years old. Was she underwater and helped to pull you out of your body? Subject, yes. David, so you came out with your mother. Was she holding your hand? Subject, she was. Our deceased family members, friends, and others who are departed are aware of our journey here through our entire lives. Jacob's mother had not seen her son physically since she was murdered decades earlier, but she was there instantaneously at his death to help him move into the light. Souls in the spirit world have their own things that they work on and do, but still like to follow the progress of their children or loved ones that are experiencing their earthly lives. This should provide the reader comfort, knowing that our departed loved ones, though on a different dimensional plane, are well aware of our journey through life. David, and then what happened? Where did you go? Subject, and then I wasn't there anymore. I don't know where I went. David, so your mother pulled your hand. Let's think about that for a moment. She helped you out of the body that had drowned, right? Subject, yes. David, she helped you come all the way up, and did you both come out of the water together, or where were you? Subject, she helped me. She helped me leave. David, and when she helped you leave, then what did you see in your mind? Subject, I just saw the horizon on the water. David, oh, was that a pretty sight? Subject, it was blinding. The light was so bright. David, so you saw the horizon. And the light was so bright. Now describe the light to me, besides it being blinding. Did you hear music or feel anything? Subject, no, I just felt very calm, like the moment in the morning after the sun rises before anything else has really woken up. David, so you felt relaxed and calm, right? Subject, yes, I just felt very calm. David, where did you go from there after you saw the light? I want you to just stop and think about it for a moment. Subject, I didn't go anywhere. I stayed there in the light. David stayed right in the light. Was your mother still with you? Subject, I don't know. I don't know. David, did anyone come to see you in the light? Subject, I wasn't alone, but I didn't feel the specific identities of other people. David, did you see yourself in that light? Subject, there wasn't really anything to see. I just was. David, okay, you just was. You felt like there were other souls around you, but there were no particular identities? Were you all just sort of together? Subject, it was the collective energy or consciousness or something cohesive, but not singled out. David, and what did that feel like then? Did it feel like you were part of something bigger? What did it feel like? Subject, the truest sense of home, of belonging in something or to something and returning to it. David, was it warm or just? Did you feel? What kind of emotions did you feel there? Subject, just peace. David, just peace. Do you know how long you were there? Subject, I don't know if there was a time that I left. It felt like I was there for a minute, but maybe I was there for years. David, so it was hard to tell time, wasn't it? Not like here. Is that right? Subject, there was not a sense of time, no sense of anything. David, just part of something peaceful, but not. Did you feel like you had retained some of your personality traits from your earlier life as Jacob? Subject, I don't remember. I suppose. David, now as we look at that life, why was it important for you to know about that life now? Subject, the way that I grew up as a child in that life, I was disadvantaged, and I came from very tormented people, and I was able to have a different life than what I would have been given because of my aunt, and I was able to work hard enough to achieve things beyond what I previously conceived for myself. David, so that was a pretty good life as far as growing and becoming somebody you were proud to be, is that right? Subject, yes, My career was very important to me, and my aunt was very proud. David, well, it sounds like a wonderful life. And the Royal Navy sounds very, very cool too. Now we drift away, as we leave that life now. Now we drift away from that life as Jacob and just go on, just back in the bubble again, just floating along. Just floating away from that life,